"You don't belong here," my daughter's fiancé shouted, instructing the security team to escort me from the wedding. "This event is for prominent guests only," he sneered, looking down his nose at my simple suit. But when his father spotted me and cried out, "Arthur Vance, is that really you?" the groom's entire world began to crumble. He had absolutely no idea who I truly was. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My old sedan looked like a piece of junk parked between the Audis and Lexus models in their grand circular driveway. The Dalton estate rose before me like a scene from a film. Marble stairways, brass railings shining in the afternoon light, and perfectly manicured bushes shaped with precision. I glanced at my watch. It was exactly 2 p.m., just as Claire had requested. The massive front door swung open before I had a chance to ring the bell. A tall man dressed in expensive, casual attire eyed me from head to toe with open contempt. His gaze moved from my worn work boots to my best suit, the charcoal one I'd purchased for Claire's college graduation 12 years prior. "You must be at the wrong house, sir. This isn't a charity kitchen. Try the next block over." His words struck me like a physical blow. I stood motionless on their flawless porch, my mouth agape, unable to form a sound. A wave of heat washed over my face as I tried to comprehend what he had just said to me. "Dad, you made it." Claire's voice, bright and warm, came from behind him. She emerged in the doorway, wearing an elegant dress that likely cost more than my entire monthly pension. Her face was aglow with pure happiness as she moved past the man, Alex, her fiancé, and wrapped her arms around my neck. "Come inside, please come in. I was watching for you from the window." She took my arm and pulled me forward, completely unaware of the exchange that had just occurred. "Alex, this is my father, Arthur Vance. Dad, this is Alex Dalton, my amazing fiancé." Alex's expression changed in an instant, like a performer swapping masks. The condescending sneer was replaced by a strained smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He offered his hand with the hesitation one might show to a sick stray. "Mr. Vance, of course. Claire has told me about you." His handshake was short and dismissive. "Please, come in." Claire beamed, standing between us and squeezing my arm. "Isn't this wonderful? My two favorite men are finally meeting." I could only nod, trying to swallow the acrid taste in my mouth. The foyer was vast, like the nave of a cathedral. A crystal chandelier scattered rainbows across the marble floors, and oil paintings in gilded frames adorned the walls. My own reflection looked back at me from the polished surfaces, appearing small and utterly out of place. "Your home is quite magnificent," I said, the words feeling forced. Alex puffed out his chest, his confidence flooding back. "Thank you. It has been in our family for 3 generations. We're firm believers in upholding certain standards." The way he stressed standards was not lost on me. Claire, still radiant with joy, missed it completely. "Just wait until you see the dining room, Dad. We're having your favorite chicken pot pie with biscuits." "Well, our chef's take on it," she giggled, linking her arm with mine. "I let him know you enjoy good, simple food." Alex's jaw clenched, almost imperceptibly. "Yes, we've made some adjustments to the menu for today. Come along, you two." Claire guided us toward a large, arched doorway. "I can't wait to give Dad the grand tour before we eat." As we ventured deeper into their palatial residence, I noticed Alex watching me in every reflective surface we passed. His stare was like ice water on my skin, cold and calculating. Claire chatted on happily about the wedding arrangements and family stories, her voice echoing against the high ceilings. "The main dining room can seat 24, but we'll be using the small table today to be cozier," she explained, leading us into a space that could have contained my entire condo. "Alex's parents are out of town, so it's just the 3 of us." The small table was made of rich mahogany, flanked by chairs that looked like museum pieces. The place settings glittered beneath another chandelier, complete with multiple forks, crystal stemware, and cloth napkins folded into intricate triangles. I had eaten my breakfast that morning from a paper plate, while standing in my kitchen. Claire pulled out a chair for me. "Sit here, Dad. You'll have a perfect view of Alex's grandmother's antique china display." Alex seated himself at the head of the table, his posture screaming ownership. Each gesture was deliberate, meant to remind me whose domain this was. The chair felt like a throne I had no right to be sitting in. "So, Mr. Vance," Alex started, his voice as smooth as aged bourbon, "Claire tells me you've recently retired. That must be a significant change. It has its challenges." I kept my reply brief, sensing he was setting a trap. Claire settled into her seat with a contented sigh. Dad was at the same steel mill for 35 years. "Can you believe that kind of dedication, Alex?" "I certainly can." Alex's smile became sharper. "Loyalty is a vital quality, isn't it? Understanding one's place, knowing where one truly belongs." A server brought out the first course, a delicate soup in a bowl so fine I was afraid to handle it. Claire launched into a conversation about table centerpieces and seating arrangements, while Alex and I circled one another like cautious predators. "And for the reception," Claire went on, "I was thinking we could do something fun, more casual. Dad always says the best get-togethers are where people can just be themselves." "How charming," Alex purred, looking anything but, though I suspect our guest list may have a different definition of comfort. Claire gave me a tour of the first floor, while Alex excused himself to check on the meal preparations. The house felt less like a home and more like a gallery. Everything was immaculate, untouched, and cold. She pointed out the library with leather-bound volumes that seemed to have never been read, and the sitting room with furniture too pristine for anyone to actually use. "Alex's grandfather founded the investment firm," Claire said, tracing a line on a marble mantelpiece. "The family has built an incredible legacy here in Boston." I nodded, reflecting on my own legacy. A 2-bedroom condo in Quincy and an old sedan in need of new tires. When we got back to the dining room, Alex was already seated scrolling on his phone. The table had been set with multiple courses arranged with military precision. I saw 4 different forks next to my plate and had no idea which one to start with. "I trust you're hungry, Mr. Vance," Alex said, placing his phone down with a deliberate air. "Our chef made something accessible." Claire clapped her hands. "Oh, this is gorgeous, Dad. You're going to love it." The chicken pot pie was nothing like mine. It was a deconstructed masterpiece with vegetables cut into perfect geometric shapes and a sauce that surely had a French name. Claire served herself with gusto, while Alex watched me fumble with the silverware, barely hiding his amusement. "So about the wedding budget," Alex said, cutting his food with surgical accuracy. "I assume you'll be wanting to contribute something for Claire's big day." The fork in my hand shook slightly. Claire and I already discussed what I can afford. Of course, of course. Alex's voice was slick with false sympathy. "I'm sure retirement is financially tight, with a fixed income and all?" Claire glanced up from her meal. "Alex, Dad has been so generous. He's giving us his life savings for our honeymoon. How sweet." Alex lifted his wineglass in a mocking gesture. "Every little bit counts, I suppose." A hot flush crept up my neck. I concentrated on my plate, trying to tune out the condescension that dripped from his every word. "I was thinking about the venue for the reception," Claire said, oblivious to the crackling tension. "Something elegant, but also warm. Dad always taught me that the best parties bring people together." "Without a doubt," Alex agreed, "though we'll need to be selective about the guest list. Some of my associates are quite particular about the company they keep." I put my fork down. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all." Alex's smile widened. "Just that different social spheres have different expectations. I'm sure you can appreciate that your friends from the mill might not feel at ease around investment bankers and politicians." "Alex?" Claire laughed nervously. "Dad's friends are wonderful people. I'm sure they are, my dear, in their own element." Alex's eyes were locked on mine. "I just want everyone to feel appropriate." That word hung between us like a dare. I gripped my knife, fantasizing about how good it would feel to wipe that smug look off his face. Dad has some great stories from his time in the Army, Claire interjected, sensing the rising tension. Tell Alex about Korea, Dad. I'm sure Mr. Vance's military service was quite different from the modern armed forces, Alex cut in smoothly. A different time, a different caliber of soldier. That was it. I sat up straighter in my chair, 35 years of hard labor showing in my broad shoulders. Different in what way? Alex's smile faltered for a second. Oh, I just meant that today's military requires a higher level of sophistication. Alex studies military history, you know, Emily added, trying to be helpful. He knows all about strategy. How interesting, I said, my voice carefully neutral. And where did you serve? Well, I never actually enlisted, but I've read extensively. Alex's confidence wobbled for a moment. Academic research provides a far more comprehensive viewpoint than first-hand experience. The silence was thick and uncomfortable. Claire looked between us, her concern growing as she finally realized something was amiss. Perhaps we should change the subject, she suggested cheerfully. The weather has been lovely, don't you think? Indeed, Alex recovered, his poise returning. Perfect for an outdoor wedding, although one's definition of perfect can vary. He was like a serpent, twisting every topic to find a new way to belittle me. Claire kept trying to guide the conversation to safer topics, but Alex always found a way back to subtle jabs about my finances, my social class, and my background. By the time they brought out dessert, an intricate confection that came with its own special utensil, I was on the verge of erupting. Claire talked about flowers and music, while Alex made thinly veiled remarks about proper wedding attire and suitable venues for people of limited means. Well, Claire finally said, glancing at her watch, I should get going for dinner with my friends tonight, Dad. Thanks so much for coming over. Wasn't this nice? I forced a smile for her. Very nice. Alex stood up first, offering his hand with the same dismissive air as before. It's been an enlightening afternoon, Mr. Vance. I'm certain we'll be seeing more of each other as the wedding gets closer. Claire walked me to the door, chattering about the cake tasting and floral arrangements scheduled for the following weekend. She gave me a tight hug, her joy radiating like the sun. I'm so glad you two finally got to meet, she whispered. I knew you'd hit it off. I kissed her on the forehead, the taste of well-intentioned lies on my tongue. Drive safe tonight, honey. The heavy front door clicked shut behind me, sounding like the closing of a bank vault. I walked to my car slowly, feeling Alex's gaze on my back from whichever window he was peering out of. The engine coughed to life, complaining about the afternoon heat. 20 minutes later, stuck in Saturday traffic on Storrow Drive, my phone rang. The screen showed Claire's name, but the voice on the other end was not hers. Mr. Vance, it's Alex. Claire just stepped away, and I thought it would be a good time for us to have a private chat. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, moving into the slow lane as traffic snarled near Boston Common. What do you want, Alex? I want to help you, as a matter of fact. His voice had the same slick quality as it did at dinner. I was reflecting on our conversation, and I think we may have started off on the wrong foot. Is that your term for it? Look, I get that this is a difficult situation for you. Claire is marrying into a world that's very different from yours. There's no shame in that. We each have our own station in life. A taxi swerved in front of me, its horn blaring. I let it pass, focusing on Alex's words, trying to decipher his game. At the wedding, some very influential people will be there. Investors, politicians, the cream of Boston's social scene. These are individuals who matter in our world. Get to your point. My point, Mr. Vance, is that appearances are crucial. I can't have Claire's father looking like he just stumbled out of a soup kitchen. The insult hit me like a punch to the gut. I veered slightly, earning an angry honk from the car next to me. Excuse me, I'm offering you my help. That suit you wore was quaint, but it's not appropriate for a Beacon Hill wedding. I am prepared to give you $800 to buy yourself something more suitable. Think of it as an investment in Claire's happiness. For a moment I was speechless. The traffic light turned red, and I came to a halt, my hands shaking with fury. "Are you there, Mr. Vance? $800 should be plenty for a respectable suit. Shoes, a tie, the whole 9 yards. Heck, that's probably more than you see in a month. You think I'm some kind of beggar? I think you're a proud man who wants the best for his daughter. And sometimes that means accepting help from those in a better position to give it." The light turned green. I hit the gas too hard, my car lurching forward as my temper finally broke. "Let me be perfectly clear, boy. I am not a charity case, and I don't want your damn money. Now listen here." "No, you listen here." My voice filled the car. "I've worked hard every single day since I was 16. I raised that girl by myself after her mother passed away, and I did it without a handout from anyone, especially not from some spoiled brat who thinks his money makes him a better man." There was a long silence on the line. I could almost feel Alex's shock through the phone. "That girl loves you for reasons I can't possibly understand," I continued, my voice now steady and dangerous. "So I will be polite at your pretentious wedding, but you will never ever mistake my civility for weakness." "You're making a mistake, old man. You don't know who you're messing with, neither do you." I hung up and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. My heart was pounding against my ribs as I drove through the familiar streets of my youth. The grand mansions and manicured lawns of Beacon Hill faded, replaced by smaller homes with chain-link fences and gardens that were lived in, not just landscaped. The adrenaline was coursing through me like a current. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly alive. Alex had expected me to cower, to take his money and his insults and be grateful for them. The shock in his voice when I stood up to him was worth any disappointment from Claire that might come later. But would it? Claire loved Alex, saw something in him that was completely lost on me. Maybe she saw past his arrogance to something real underneath, or maybe she was just blinded by his wealth, seduced by a life she'd never dreamed of. My phone buzzed with a text. I ignored it, keeping my eyes on the road. Quincy was just 10 minutes away. My neighborhood, my people, my world. A world where a man's worth wasn't judged by his bank account or the brand of his clothes. The phone buzzed again, and then a third time. At the next red light, I glanced down. 3 texts from unknown numbers. "This isn't finished. You will regret this. Claire will side with me." I deleted them without a second thought and tossed the phone back on the seat. Let him send his pathetic threats. Let him try to intimidate me. He had just learned a lesson that his expensive education never taught him. Some men don't stay down when you push them. My car rumbled down the tree-lined streets of Quincy, past the modest homes of teachers, mechanics, and retirees like myself. No marble floors or crystal chandeliers here, just honest people who knew the value of hard work. I pulled into my driveway, the familiar squeak of the garage door a welcome sound. For 35 years I'd come home to this house, first with my wife, then with Claire, and now by myself. But it was mine, paid for with sweat and sacrifice, not inherited wealth. Alex Dalton had no idea what he had just started. The anger that felt so righteous on the phone began to subside as I pulled into my driveway. My hands were still shaking a bit as I cut the engine and sat in the quiet of my garage. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a heavier, more solitary feeling in its wake. I walked past the small garden I tended to myself, with its rows of tomatoes, peppers, and roses. It was nothing elaborate, just honest work. The evening air was fragrant with the scent of Mrs. Jenkins' roses from next door, a reminder that normal life went on even as my world was being turned upside down. Inside, I carefully hung my good suit in the closet and changed into comfortable jeans and a flannel shirt. The change felt like shedding a suit of armor, like returning to myself after hours of pretending to belong in Alex's world. My front porch had always been my place for contemplation. The old rocking chair groaned as I settled into it with a cigar. The ritual was as natural as breathing. Strike the match, light the tip, take the first slow puff. simple pleasures that money couldn't enhance. What on earth did Claire see in that snob? Alex thought money was the solution to everything, that $800 could purchase my dignity like a new suit. But Claire was intelligent, educated, and successful. How could she be so blind to his arrogance? The neighborhood settled into its usual Saturday evening rhythm. Mr. Miller was watering his lawn across the street as his grandkids chased fireflies. The Taylors sat on their front steps, sharing a beer and quiet conversation. These were real people living real lives, not putting on a show for a social registry. I thought of Margaret, my late wife, and how she would have dealt with Alex's insults. She had a way of cutting through pretense with a gentle wit, making pompous people see their own foolishness without leaving scars. Claire had her mother's intelligence, but maybe not her eye for character. The photos inside my house told our family's story better than any mansion ever could. Claire taking her first steps in our small kitchen, her kindergarten graduation in a hand-me-down dress that Margaret had altered 3 times, high school science projects taking over our dining room table, college acceptance letters that made me weep with pride, knowing all the sacrifices had been worth it. Margaret passed away when Claire was 15. She was old enough to understand the loss, but young enough to need a steady hand to guide her through the grief. Those years forged a bond between us that wealthy families with their nannies and boarding schools could never comprehend. We were a team, a father and his daughter, facing whatever life threw at us, until now. Smoke drifted from my cigar as evening turned to twilight. Alex's threats replayed in my mind, but beneath his bluster, I had detected something else, uncertainty. He had expected me to fold, to grovel for his charity. When I fought back, he sounded genuinely shocked, like a bully who just discovered his victim could bite back. Claire's happiness was more important than my pride, but watching her choose Alex's narrative over mine would be like losing her all over again. First to his world of privilege, and then to his lies about who her father really was. The streetlights flickered on as Quincy settled into its evening quiet. The sounds of children playing faded as families went inside for dinner. I had eaten countless meals by myself since Margaret's passing, but tonight the silence felt especially profound. Tomorrow Claire would call or visit, trying to smooth things over, framing it all as a misunderstanding. Alex would have already told her his side of the story, painting himself as the reasonable one trying to help a stubborn old man. She would believe him because she wanted to, because her future was tied to him. My cigar burned down to the nub as I sat watching the familiar patterns of my neighborhood. This was my world, modest but genuine, built on decades of hard work. Alex could mock it, but he would never understand the satisfaction of creating something real from nothing. The porch light cast long shadows as I put out my cigar and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of my resolve. But tonight, in the quiet of my small home, I could still remember who I was and what I had built. The house felt emptier than usual. Family photos smiled from every surface, capturing joyful moments that now felt impossibly distant. Claire's childhood room was still exactly as she'd left it when she went to college, a shrine to the dreams I had helped her achieve. I knew I had to tell Claire what really happened during that phone call. The question was whether she would believe her father or her fiancé when their stories clashed. Sunday morning was gray and dreary, matching the mood I was in after a restless night. I had replayed the conversation with Alex a dozen times in my head, his condescending tone growing sharper with each recollection. The coffee tasted bitter as I skimmed the newspaper, not really reading the words. Claire's car pulled into the driveway at 10:30, earlier than her usual Sunday visits. I watched from the window as she gathered her things and locked the car with brisk, purposeful movements. She had the same determined look on her face that I remembered from her teenage years, when she was set on solving a problem. "Good morning, Dad." She came through the front door with a forced cheerfulness, kissing me on the cheek before sitting on the couch. "It's a lovely day, isn't it?" I poured her a cup of coffee in the lopsided mug she had made for me in a 7th grade art class. "I'm surprised to see you so early, honey." "Well, I wanted to come by and clear the air about yesterday." She nervously smoothed her skirt. Alex mentioned there might have been some kind of misunderstanding after dinner. Her careful wording told me everything. Alex had already spun his tale, likely portraying himself as the patient victim of my irrational anger. What kind of misunderstanding did he describe? Claire's smile faltered. "He said you seemed upset during your phone call, that maybe you took something he said the wrong way. You know how men can be, all pride and miscommunication." I set my coffee cup down deliberately. "Claire, I need you to listen very carefully to what happened yesterday." For the next 10 minutes, I told her everything about Alex's phone call, word for word. His condescending tone, the soup kitchen comment, the $800 bribe disguised as help. I watched her expression shift from confident dismissal to uncomfortable doubt, and finally to defensive anger. "Dad, that's completely different from what Alex told me." Her voice was accusatory, as if I were the one fabricating the story. "He said he offered to help with wedding costs and you took offense. $800 for a suit, Claire? Because I looked like I'd wandered in from a soup kitchen?" Those were his exact words. She stood up abruptly and paced to the window, which overlooked my humble garden. "Alex would never say something like that. He's not a cruel person. Then one of us is lying to you." The words hung between us like a challenge. Claire turned to face me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of frustration. "Dad, you've only spent a couple of hours with him. I've been with Alex for 8 months. I know him. He's kind and generous and thoughtful. Maybe you just misinterpreted his tone on the phone. There's no misinterpreting a man calling your father a beggar, sweetheart. He didn't call you a beggar. He was trying to help." Her voice rose with every word. "Do you have any idea how expensive weddings are?" Maybe he was just being practical. I leaned back in my recliner and studied my daughter's face, the defensive flush on her cheeks, the way she avoided my gaze, the slight tremble in her voice. All signs of someone desperately trying to hold on to a belief that was under attack. "Claire, have I ever lied to you?" "Never. But—" She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. "This is different. This is about Alex, about our future. You don't understand what it's like to fall in love with someone incredible, to build a life together. I was married to your mother for 17 years. I know what love is. That was different. You and Mom were from the same background, the same world. Alex and I are bridging 2 different worlds, and that's complicated." The phrase "different worlds" echoed Alex's condescension. It was shocking how quickly she had adopted his vocabulary, his way of categorizing people. "And what world am I from exactly?" Claire's face fell with instant regret. "I didn't mean it like that, Dad. I just meant that Alex's family has certain expectations, certain standards for formal occasions, standards that I don't meet." "No, that's not what I said," but her protest was weak. "Look, maybe Alex could have worded things better, but his heart was in the right place. He wants you to feel comfortable at the wedding." I stood up slowly, feeling all of my 65 years. Comfortable by accepting his charity? It's not charity when it's family helping family. I'm not his family, Claire. You are. And if he can't treat your father with basic respect, what does that say about how he really sees you? Her face hardened into the stubborn expression I'd seen so many times when she was a teenager. "Alex loves me. We're building a beautiful life together, and I won't let anyone ruin that. Not even you." Those words hurt more than any of Alex's insults. Coming from Claire, they felt like a betrayal. It was like watching my daughter choose a stranger's lies over a lifetime of truth between us. "So, you believe him?" "I believe the man I'm going to marry." "Yes." She snatched her purse with sharp, angry movements. "I came here hoping we could resolve this. But you're determined to see the worst in Alex, and you're determined to see the best, even when he's showing you otherwise. Claire paused at the door, her hand on the knob. I love you, Dad. But I love Alex, too. If you can't accept that, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound as final as a judge's gavel. I stood in my suddenly silent living room, listening to her car start and drive away. For the first time in Claire's 32 years, we had ended a conversation in anger, with words that neither of us could take back. The afternoon was a blur of mindless tasks. I cleaned my already tidy house, trimmed hedges that didn't need it, and organized the tools in my garage for the third time this month. Anything to keep my hands occupied while my mind reeled from Claire's words. By 8 o'clock, I was exhausted and retreated to my bedroom, the most private space in my world. The photographs on my dresser seemed to mock me. Claire at 5 with a gap-toothed grin after losing her first tooth. Claire at 12, looking proud in her middle school graduation dress. Claire at 18, radiant in her high school cap and gown, hugging me tightly as we both cried. Each photo captured a moment when I was her hero, her protector, her most trusted advisor. When did that change? When did Alex's 8-month courtship erase 32 years of love and trust? I picked up my favorite photo, Claire at 25, receiving her college diploma. She had insisted I stand next to her for the family pictures, loudly declaring that none of her success would have been possible without her father's support. The pride in her voice that day had made every sacrifice worthwhile. I love you, Dad, but I love Alex, too. Her words echoed in the quiet room, as if love were a zero-sum game, as if choosing Alex meant abandoning me. Margaret had taught Claire better than that. Love, she always said, multiplies when it's shared. It doesn't diminish. The weight of betrayal settled in my chest like a physical ache. Not Alex's betrayal. I expected nothing less from him. It was Claire's betrayal that cut so deep because it was unthinkable. She had chosen his lies over my truth, his version of reality over our shared history. I put down the graduation photo and picked up another. Claire at 10, standing proudly beside the vegetable garden we had planted together after Margaret's death. We had needed that project, needed something living and growing to anchor us during those dark months of grief. She had insisted on planting extra tomatoes to share with our neighbors, even though money was tight. Maybe you misunderstood his tone. Her voice had been so certain that her father was wrong and her fiancé was right. When had my judgment become so untrustworthy in her eyes? The bedside lamp cast a warm glow on decades of memories. Birthday parties in our small backyard, Christmas mornings around our modest tree, quiet evenings helping with homework at the kitchen table, simple moments that had forged an unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. Or so I had thought. Margaret's jewelry box sat on the corner of my dresser, exactly where she had left it 15 years ago. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the simple engagement ring I had bought with 3 months' wages from the mill. No diamonds, no gold, just a simple silver band with a tiny stone that had looked enormous to our young eyes. Claire had adored that ring as a child and would sometimes wear it on special occasions when she was small enough for it to fit. "Someday I'll find a love like you and Mama had," she had declared with all the certainty of an 8-year-old. And now she had found Alex instead. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and groans. Next door, the faint murmur of the Parkers' television drifted through the thin walls. Across the street, Mr. Miller's porch light flickered, an electrical issue he'd been meaning to fix for months. Normal life went on as my world collapsed, one conversation at a time. I considered calling Claire, trying to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But what could I say to repair her faith in Alex or restore her trust in me? She had made her choice with absolute clarity. The worst part wasn't losing the argument about Alex's character. The worst part was realizing that my daughter, the girl I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for, Genuinely believed I was capable of lying about something so important, that my jealousy or stubbornness could drive me to slander her future husband with made-up cruelties. Outside my window, Quincy settled into its Sunday evening quiet. Children had been called inside for baths and bedtime stories. Parents sat on their front porches, sharing the small victories and defeats of the day, their families intact, their bonds unbroken. I placed the photos back on the dresser, all except one, Claire's graduation picture. It was the last time I had felt unequivocally important in her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of whatever relationship we had left. But tonight, holding that single photograph, I made a decision. Claire could choose Alex's version of events. She could believe his lies about my character and his sanitized version of his own, but I would not disappear quietly from her life. Alex Dalton had started this war with his arrogance and his $800 bribes. He had underestimated a steelworker's pride and a father's love. Now he was about to learn that some battles can't be won with money or social status. I set the graduation photo on my nightstand, where it would be the first thing I saw in the morning, a reminder of what I was fighting for and why surrender was never an option. Monday dragged on, heavy with the weight of unfinished business. I spent the day working in my garden and repairing a loose fence board, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind grappled with Sunday's confrontation with Claire. By evening, I felt more grounded, more like myself than I had in days. The phone rang as I was finishing a simple dinner of leftover pot pie. Claire's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe she had had time to think, to reconsider Alex's story. Mr. Vance. Alex's voice, sharp and cold, cut through my hopes. We need to have another man-to-man talk. The sheer presumption of his tone, using Claire's phone as if it were his own, calling me in my own home as if he had every right, set my teeth on edge. What do you want now, Alex? I want to resolve this unfortunate situation before it escalates. His voice was smooth and confident, the voice of someone who had never been truly challenged. Claire told me about your conversation yesterday, and frankly, I'm disappointed. I set down my fork and sat up straighter. Disappointed in what exactly? In your stubborn refusal to accept reality. Claire's happiness is my top priority, and your wild accusations are causing stress for the woman I love. Wild accusations? I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting the condescension in it. Is that what you call the truth? Mr. Vance, let me be crystal clear. If you don't stop spreading these lies about me, I will make sure you are not at the wedding at all. The threat hung in the air like smoke. For a moment I was too stunned to speak. Then, something hard and cold settled in my chest, something I hadn't felt since my army days. Are you threatening me, boy? I'm explaining the consequences of your actions. Claire loves me, she trusts me, and she believes me. If you force her to choose between her father and her future husband, how do you think that will end? My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. You are way out of line. Am I? You're embarrassing Claire with these ridiculous stories about soup kitchens and charity money. She's beginning to think her own father has lost his grip on reality. The calculated cruelty of his words was staggering. He wasn't just threatening me. He was systematically dismantling my relationship with my daughter, twisting my honesty into a sign of mental decline. Listen to me carefully, Alex. My voice dropped to a register I hadn't used in years, a voice that carried the weight of a man who had faced real threats and survived them. You can play your little games with Claire because she loves you. But if you hurt her, if you break her spirit with your arrogance and your need for control, you will regret it. For the first time since I'd met him, Alex seemed taken aback. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the consequences of your actions. I threw his own words back at him with icy precision. Claire is my daughter. I raised her, protected her, and loved her when she had no one else. That bond doesn't just vanish because some spoiled rich kid thinks he owns her. You're living in the past, old man. Claire has a new life now, a better life, with people who can actually provide for her. Money isn't everything, son. A man's worth is measured by how he treats people who can't fight back. And sometimes a man's worth is measured by what he can actually achieve in the world. Alex's voice hardened with renewed confidence. Claire knows which one of us has more to offer. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of my 65 years and the strength that came with them. We'll see about that. Yes, we will. And when we do, I think you'll find that Claire makes the smart choice. She always does. The line went dead, leaving me standing in my kitchen with the phone buzzing in my hand like an angry insect. But instead of the rage I had felt after our first confrontation, I felt something different now. Clarity, purpose, the calm that comes before a decisive move. Alex had made two critical mistakes. First, he assumed that threatening me would make me back down. Second, he revealed just how confident he was in his control over Claire. That kind of arrogance makes a man careless, makes him believe his own lies about being untouchable. I set the phone down with a steady hand and returned to my dinner. The pot pie tasted better than it had in weeks. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt like myself again. Not the victim of Alex's psychological games, but the man who had raised Claire Vance to be strong and independent. Tomorrow, I would start handling this wedding business my own way. Alex wanted to play games about appearances and social status. Fine. But he had just reminded me that some battles require more than a defensive stance. The graduation photo on the counter caught the light from my kitchen window. Claire's smile as bright as ever. She had chosen Alex's side for now, but the war was far from over. It was time to show that smug banker what a real man looked like. Tuesday afternoon, I found myself in the parking lot of South Shore Plaza, staring at the modest storefronts of suburban retail. I had driven past 3 high-end men's shops downtown on my way here, the kind of places where Alex probably bought his suits, where the salesman would size up my car and treat me accordingly. This was different. Murphy's Men's Clothing had been serving the middle class of Boston for 30 years, according to the faded sign above the door. It was the kind of place where teachers and foremen bought suits for their daughters' weddings without taking out a second mortgage. A bell chimed as I walked in, catching the attention of a gray-haired man arranging ties behind the counter. He took in my work clothes and calloused hands without judgment, just a professional appraisal. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "I need a suit for a wedding in June. It's a formal occasion." I kept my voice steady, matter of fact, something appropriate but not flashy. He nodded as if I had passed some unspoken test. Special occasion suits are our specialty. "What's your price range?" The directness of the question surprised me. There was no dancing around the subject, no assumptions about what I could or couldn't afford. $400, maybe $5 if it's worth it. We can definitely work with that. Follow me. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of a 3-way mirror, wearing a charcoal gray suit that transformed my reflection into someone I barely recognized. The jacket fit perfectly across my shoulders without pulling, the trousers broke just right over my dress shoes, and the fabric felt substantial and real, not the synthetic stuff that filled discount racks. That's a good choice. The salesman, his name tag read Frank, stepped back to assess the fit. It's a classic style that never goes out of fashion. You'll wear this suit for years. I turned slightly, examining myself from different angles. The man in the mirror looked dignified, respectable, like someone who belonged at an elegant gathering. Not the steelworker Alex saw when he looked at me, but not a costume either. Just me, dressed for the occasion. "How much?" $380 for the suit, another $40 for basic alterations. "When do you need it?" "The wedding is in June, the first Saturday." Frank made a note on his tablet. "Plenty of time. We'll have it ready by Friday, so you'll have the weekend to make sure everything is perfect." As he wrote up the order, I thought about Claire's graduation day. She had been so proud to walk across that stage, and I had been so proud to be her father. The cheap suit I'd worn that day had seemed elegant enough at the time, surrounded by other working-class families celebrating their children's achievements. But Alex's world had different rules. Appearance mattered, not for its own sake, but as a weapon in a social war. He had tried to disarm me with his offer of charity, to make me dependent on his generosity for my own dignity. Instead, I was paying my own way, with money I had earned through honest work. The difference might seem trivial to an outsider, but to me, it meant everything. "Do you want the receipt?" Frank held out the carbon copy. "Yes, please." I folded it carefully and tucked it into my wallet next to Claire's graduation photo. $420, more than I had spent on clothes in the last 3 years combined, but worth every penny for what it represented. As I walked back to my car with the suit bag, I felt a confidence I hadn't experienced since this whole mess began. Alex had tried to diminish me by attacking my appearance, my social status, my worth as Claire's father. But dignity couldn't be bought or sold. It came from within, from knowing who you were and standing by your principles. The drive home took me through the familiar neighborhoods of my youth, past houses where honest people lived honest lives. No marble floors or crystal chandeliers, just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done and families held together by love, not money. I hung the suit carefully in my bedroom closet next to my Sunday best and the navy blazer I had worn to every important event in Claire's life. Come June, I would walk into that Beacon Hill wedding looking like I belonged there. Not because Alex had granted me permission, but because Claire was my daughter, and no amount of money could change that. Alex thought he had won this battle by turning Claire against me, by making her question my honesty and judgment. But battles weren't wars, and wars weren't won by the side with the most money. They were won by the side with the most determination. June couldn't come soon enough. Alex wanted to see what I was really made of. He was about to get his chance. Over the next few weeks, Alex's confidence swelled like a weed. The pattern became clear during our monthly family dinners, each one more tense than the last, as he pushed the boundaries of acceptable rudeness. Late April brought our first encounter after the suit incident at an upscale steakhouse Alex had selected. When I walked in wearing my new charcoal gray suit, his eyebrows shot up in surprise, an expression he quickly masked with renewed calculation. Claire was thrilled with my improved appearance, chattering about how handsome I looked, while Alex observed me like a chess player re-evaluating his opponent. "You clean up well, Mr. Vance," he remarked with studied nonchalance. "Claire mentioned you have some old-fashioned ideas about modern events. I trust you'll find our wedding suitably traditional." The emphasis on traditional was layered with condescending meaning, but I just nodded and complimented Claire's choice of restaurant, refusing to be baited. Early May was Mother's Day dinner with Claire's college friends and their families. Alex put on a performance for the larger audience, casually mentioning his graduate school connections and the high caliber of guests who would be at the wedding. Each comment was a subtle jab, a reminder that I didn't belong in such company, that my presence was merely tolerated. "I trust you understand we'll have some very prominent guests," he said over coffee, his voice just loud enough for the nearby tables to overhear. "Investment partners, political figures, people who are important in Boston society." Claire laughed nervously. "Alex, Dad's been to plenty of formal events." "Remember my college graduation?" "Of course," Alex smiled with razor-sharp precision. "Though I imagine university events have a different feel than private society functions." I sipped my coffee and watched him, amazed at the calculated nature of each insult. He never said anything that Claire could definitively label as cruel, but the message was clear. Her father was out of his league, and everyone knew it. Mid-May was filled with wedding planning sessions that felt more like military briefings. Alex had charts, schedules, vendor contracts, and a guest list hierarchy. Everything was organized with corporate efficiency, including my role as father of the bride, a title he made sound like a ceremonial post rather than a biological fact. "I've arranged for you to be seated at table 12, he announced during one particularly detailed session. "It's perfectly situated. you'll have an excellent view of the ceremony without being central to the photographs." Claire frowned. "Alex, shouldn't Dad be in the family photos?" "Of course. The formal portraits? Absolutely. I just meant the candid shots during dinner, the ones that might end up in magazines or society pages. We want to be thoughtful about the presentation." The message was clear. I was to be hidden from public view while the wealthy guests enjoyed prime seating and photo ops. But I nodded agreeably, even suggesting that table 12 sounded perfect. My compliance seemed to confuse Alex, who had clearly expected resistance. By late May, his arrogance had reached astounding levels. During our final pre-wedding dinner, he actually pulled out his phone to show Claire photos from previous Beacon Hill weddings, pointing out the elegant attire and sophisticated atmosphere. "This is the standard we're aiming for," he explained, swiping through images of men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns. "Everyone who matters in Boston will be watching how we handle this celebration." Claire looked at the photos with growing anxiety. "It all seems so formal." "Formal, but not stuffy," Alex assured her. "Though I do hope everyone understands the importance of appropriate presentation. We can't have anyone feeling out of place or uncomfortable." He glanced pointedly at me as he said it, and I nodded with apparent understanding. Inwardly, I marveled at his complete lack of self-awareness. He had become so comfortable with his psychological dominance that he had stopped being careful, stopped maintaining even a pretense of respect. Perfect. The wedding was just days away, and Alex had completely revealed his true character. Not just to me, but to anyone willing to look past his polished exterior. Claire's stress had mounted with each gathering, her attempts at mediation growing more desperate, as the tension between her father and her fiancé became impossible to ignore. But she still believed Alex's version of events, still trusted that her father was the problem, and her future husband was simply trying to uphold standards. Love had blinded her, just as Alex had planned. Soon, that would change. I was ready for whatever June would bring, ready to show Alex Dalton and his Beacon Hill friends exactly what kind of man they had been dismissing. The suit in my closet was just the beginning. The real surprise would come when Alex discovered that some battles couldn't be won with money and social status. Claire deserved better than a man who confused love with control, who measured a person's worth by their bank statement rather than their character. Come Saturday, she would finally see Alex's true colors on full display for everyone to witness. The countdown had begun. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect June sunshine that made Boston sparkle. I drove my old sedan through the Beacon Hill district, past grand townhouses that could have housed entire blocks of Quincy, toward the Fairmont Copley Plaza, where Claire's wedding was to take place. The hotel's limestone facade rose before me like a fortress of privilege, its brass fixtures gleaming in the afternoon light. Luxury cars lined the street, Bentleys, Mercedes, Jaguars, as uniformed valets guided them into position with practiced ease. My weathered car looked like a relic from another era among such automotive nobility, but I felt different than I had months ago. My new suit transformed my reflection in the rearview mirror into someone who belonged anywhere that dignity mattered. The charcoal gray fabric fit my shoulders with a quiet authority, the proper cut lending a certain weight to my bearing. I had earned this moment through months of strategic patience. The afternoon ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock, and guests were already arriving in clusters of expensive fabric and polished leather. Women in designer dresses that cost more than my monthly pension laughed with practiced charm, while men in bespoke suits discussed market trends and political connections. This was Alex's world, all surface and performance, wealth displayed like military medals. I walked toward the hotel entrance with a steady, purposeful stride. The doorman's eyes registered my approach with a professional assessment, noting the quality of my suit, if not its modest price. For a moment I thought I might simply blend into the elegant crowd and find my assigned seat without any fuss. Then Alex appeared. He materialized from behind a pillar near the entrance, deliberately positioned to intercept me. His wedding attire was impeccable: a morning coat, striped trousers, and a silk tie that probably cost more than my entire outfit. But his expression held the familiar mix of surprise and calculating displeasure I had come to know so well. "Well, well," he said, his voice pitched, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Look what the cat dragged in." Other wedding attendees slowed their pace, sensing drama. Alex had chosen his moment carefully, public enough to demonstrate his power, formal enough to make any response from me seem inappropriate. "Good afternoon, Alex," I replied evenly. "It's a beautiful day for a wedding." "Indeed it is." His smile was as warm as winter steel. "Though I must say, despite the obvious effort you've made with your appearance, you still look rather out of place. This celebration is for respectable people." The insult was delivered with surgical precision, with enough social polish that a casual observer might mistake it for misguided concern. But the message was unmistakable. I didn't belong here. I never would, and everyone should know it. "I dressed my best," I said quietly, "for my daughter." "Your daughter will be fine without you. In fact, she'll be better off." Alex gestured subtly, and two security guards moved closer from their posts near the hotel pillars. "I think it's time for you to leave." The guards approached with professional courtesy, but unmistakable intent. They were just good men doing their jobs, following the instructions of their employer's family. One placed a firm but respectful hand on my shoulder. "Sir, we'll need to ask you to come with us," the senior guard said apologetically. Alex stood watching with barely concealed satisfaction, his moment of absolute triumph finally at hand. 2 months of psychological warfare had led to this: the public humiliation of Claire's father on her wedding day, witnessed by Boston's social elite. He had won, or so he believed. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Wait a minute." The voice carried both authority and confusion. "Is that you? The same Arthur Vance?" I turned slowly, recognizing the voice even before I saw the face. 50 years collapsed in an instant as William Dalton approached through the crowd, his formal attire impeccable, his expression one of growing astonishment. "William," I said simply, watching as recognition dawned in his eyes like a sunrise. He stopped a few feet away, studying my face with the intensity of a man confirming a miracle. Time had changed us both. His hair was now silver, my face more weathered. But some things transcend decades: the way a man carries himself, the set of his shoulders, the look in his eyes. The same Arthur Vance who saved my life during the ambush outside Da Nang. April 10th, 1971. The security guard's hand fell from my shoulder. Alex's confident smile began to waver as he watched his father's emotional reaction to the man he had just ordered to be removed. "That was me," I confirmed, feeling the weight of 50 years of unspoken gratitude suddenly fill the space between us. William's eyes filled with tears, which he made no attempt to hide. In front of Boston's social elite, this powerful businessman broke down like the 23-year-old lieutenant I had pulled from a burning truck half a century ago. "I've been looking for you," he whispered, then louder. "I've been looking for you for 50 years." The wedding guests formed a respectful circle around us, sensing something profound was unfolding. Alex stood frozen at the edge of the group, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and a growing horror, as he began to grasp the magnitude of his mistake. "Dad, what's going on?" Alex's voice cracked slightly. "This man is just a steel worker, nobody important." William whirled on his son with an expression I had seen only once before, when he was a young officer discovering that his sergeant had abandoned wounded men under fire. "Nobody important." William's voice carried across the hotel entrance. "This man crawled through enemy fire to pull me from a burning vehicle. He carried me to safety while explosions tore apart everything around us. He saved my life when he could have saved himself." The story poured out of him like water from a broken dam. How the NVA had ambushed their convoy, how his truck had taken a direct hit and burst into flames, how I had seen him trapped inside and made the split-second decision that defined both our lives. I was unconscious, pinned by twisted metal, William continued, his voice breaking. Arthur Vance risked everything to get me out. The ammunition in that truck started cooking off 30 seconds after he pulled me clear. 30 seconds. Alex's face had gone completely white. The wedding guests stared at him with a mixture of shock and disgust, finally understanding the kind of man who would humiliate a war hero at his own daughter's wedding. "Sir," the security guard said quietly. "Stand down," William ordered, never taking his eyes off his son. "This man is my guest. He is my honored guest." William stepped forward and embraced me with the fierce gratitude of a man who had carried a debt for more than half his life. Around us, Boston's social elite witnessed something they rarely saw in their carefully managed world: authentic emotion, real honor, genuine heroism. "I tried to find you after the war," William said, still gripping my shoulders. "The Army records were a mess. Soldiers scattered to the wind. I hired private investigators, searched veterans' organizations. I never stopped looking." "I never needed thanks," I replied, and I meant it. We were soldiers. We looked out for each other. But I needed to give them. William turned back to his son, his voice dropping to a register that carried absolute authority. "Alex, what exactly have you done to this man?" Alex stammered something about misunderstandings and different social backgrounds, but his father's expression stopped him cold. The wedding guests continued to watch in stunned silence as the truth unfolded. "This man," William announced to the crowd, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a lifetime in business and command, "is the reason I am alive today, the reason my son exists, the reason this wedding is even happening." The irony was lost on no one. Alex had just tried to humiliate the man responsible for his very existence, had called security to remove the hero who had made his privileged life possible. William wiped tears from his eyes and turned to his son with a mixture of disappointment and growing anger. "Alex, I think you and I need to have a very serious conversation about honor, gratitude, and what it means to be a Dalton." Alex's desperate apologies began immediately, each word dripping with the panic of a man watching his world collapse in real time. "Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry. Please come inside. You should be at the head table. You should be honored." But I held up my hand, stopping his frantic attempts at damage control. The wedding guests watched in fascination as the social order they understood was completely inverted before their eyes. "No, thank you, son," I said with quiet dignity. "This is your wedding, your celebration. You handle it however you see fit." William stepped closer, understanding immediately. "Arthur, would you join me for a drink somewhere more comfortable? We have 50 years to catch up on." "That sounds perfect." I turned to face Alex one last time, seeing him clearly for what he was. Not a powerful man commanding respect, but a frightened boy who had just learned the difference between wealth and worth. Take care of Claire. Make her happy. That's all that matters. The walk to the Black Rose took us 3 blocks from the Fairmont's marble and crystal elegance into a world of weathered wood and authentic conversation. The contrast felt like stepping from a museum into someone's living room, real instead of performed, genuine instead of calculated. We settled into a corner booth with pints of beer that cost less than the appetizers at the hotel. William had loosened his formal tie, and I had removed my suit jacket. 2 old soldiers finding their comfort zone after decades on different paths. "So you became a steelworker," William said, his voice filled with genuine interest. 35 years, Alex mentioned. "Good, honest work. Raised my daughter, bought my house, lived my life." I sipped my beer and smiled. No complaints. "And I became everything my father wanted," William said, his expression growing thoughtful. "Businessman, social climber, member of all the right clubs. But I never forgot that day outside Da Nang. Never forgot the man who saved my life while rockets rained down around us. We talked for 2 hours, sharing stories of marriages and children, successes and losses. William spoke of building his father's investment firm into something bigger, of the pressure to maintain a social standing and a family legacy. I told him about Margaret's death, about raising Claire on my own, about the simple satisfactions of honest work and modest achievements. I envied you sometimes, William admitted, as the afternoon light slanted through the pub's windows, reading about factory workers and their unions, their sense of solidarity. You built something real, community, genuine relationships, and you built something impressive, I replied. Success, security, opportunity for your family. But at what cost? William's voice was laced with regret. Look at my son. All privilege and no character. He nearly ruined the wedding of the daughter of the man who saved his father's life. What does that say about how I raised him? Outside, Boston hummed with weekend energy. Inside, two men who had shared the worst and best of human nature found themselves grateful for both the reunion and the perspective it provided. Alex is young, I said eventually. Young people make mistakes. The question is whether they learn from them. Claire seems like a remarkable woman, William said. Strong, intelligent, independent. She must get that from her father. I thought about Claire back at the hotel, probably wondering why her father and future father-in-law had disappeared together. She would learn the truth eventually, about Alex's cruelty and my patient endurance, about the military connection that had changed everything. She'll be fine, I said with certainty. Claire's smart enough to figure out who Alex really is, and now she'll have you watching out for her too. William raised his glass in a toast to second chances, old friendships, and the wisdom that comes from surviving our own mistakes. We drank to that, two veterans who had found each other again after 5 decades. The afternoon sun slanted lower through the pub windows, painting everything in a golden light that felt like a benediction. Outside, Alex's elaborate wedding continued without us. Inside the Black Rose, something far more valuable was happening. A genuine connection between two men who understood the difference between what money could buy and what life truly offered. Some battles were worth fighting, some victories were worth waiting for, and sometimes justice arrives exactly when it's supposed to, wearing the face of an old friend who never forgot a debt of honor. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.